Hello and a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the news desk. My name is Sophia Wanuna. Let's have a look at the highlights. Form 1 2016 placement for last year's KCPE candidates begins. EACC detectives raid the thick home of Murang'a Governor Mwangi wa Iria. Murdered Kalenjin musician Diana Chemutai burial in Bomet. Of the Form 1 selection just concluded moments ago at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. We saw that presented by the CS Education. That's Dr. Fred Matiang'i will shortly be crossing back to KICD to speak to my colleague Michelle Ngele, who's holding fort for us and on that particular story to give us more detail. But that process has officially been launched and it's set to begin. Of course, it's an automated system, so we'll be giving you more details in just a short while. Now, the Central Organization of Trade Unions, COTU, says the government is not handling the aftermath of the Al-Shabaab attack on Kenya Defense Forces base professionally. Deputy Secretary General Benson Okwaro says Department of Defense should come out and give a clear number of casualties from the attack and pass the same information to the next of kin. He was speaking in Kisumu earlier this morning.
As COTU, we think it is not time for blame games now. It's time for Kenya to come together because it's the life of Kenyans who come from all the political sides, and therefore we should not have blame games. We should work together and be able to console the family of those fellows who agree. Probably the only thing I may want to say at this point in time that it's important for the government to come out and let Kenyans know exactly the number of people that are affected, those who lost their lives, those who are injured, so that the anxiety that is existing currently is done away with, so that we don't keep on talking about so many people. We don't see people in the social media creating their own news.
We now cross over to Uasin Gishu County, where reporter Masi Kandia spent the day with some of the families still waiting for information on their kin.
Mzee Sirikwa looks keenly at the newspaper. The information in the papers is very important to him. He is particularly interested with the details on the Somalia Saturday attack. And as he flips through the pages, a few meters away, his wife can't stop looking at her phone. It's been in her hand since Saturday. It's from this phone that they expect to receive information on the fate of their son. It's 5 days now since they heard from their loved ones.
Hakuna kulala, usiku wakena wanaingia, mchana wanaingia, asubuhi wanaingia wakitoka.
It's cold in Nandi County and the rainy season is here, but that doesn't deter friends and family from visiting and sitting as they wait with the family.
Situjulishwe mapema sababu sahi tuko kwa nyumba kwa boma tu, atuelewe kwamba tutapanga mashishi namna gani. Watu wanakuja, wengine wanataka kutusaidia, lakini sasa atuelewe kama tutasaidika namna gani, sababu atujui hata tutapanga itakuwa lini. Ama mtoto yetu kabisa ako bado still ako missing, na wale wengine wenye nasikia bado hawajapatikana mpaka sasa.
Minds here wonder. The turmoil on Kisorio's mind is evident from his expression, and he states that everything at their home is at a standstill as they wait for the news of his 22-year-old brother Wesley Kimeli.
Na mandugu zangu wengine na matatu zangu wako nyumbani, wanastahili warudi kazini, lakini hakuna sasa vile mtu anaweza rudi kazini, na tunajua tuko kuna kitu imefanyika, na tunajua ndugu yetu wako ndani, na mpaka saa hii hakuna vile wanaweza rudi kazini sababu hata yeye mwenyewe hasienda kufanya kazi, watoto hawasienda kusoma. Sisi nukulia tu kwa boma.
This is one of the several families in Nandi and Uasin Gishu counties that are still waiting. Families here say they have submitted their details to the Department of Defense, but as of Tuesday evening, none of the families we visited had been called with information on their sons. With so little information here, hope is what these families grasp onto until the wait is finally over. Marcy Kandia, KTN News, Nandi County.
Back now to our top story on the Form 1 selection exercise that has officially been launched, and pupils who sat the Kenya Certificate of Primary Education exams last year are set to know which secondary schools they will join this year. Education Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i has launched the Form 1 selection exercise, which will see 30,000 more pupils join secondary school compared to last year. Now, about 730,000 pupils are expected to join secondary schools this year compared to 696,000 last year. The Education Minister launched the selection at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development here in Nairobi, and we now cross over to our Michelle Ngele. Michelle, good afternoon. Tell us more about what the CS had to say this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much, Sophia, in studio. So we're here at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development just after that opening ceremony kicking off the Form 1 selection for the year 2016. The Education Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, has spoken, and he did lay out new reforms that will tackle corruption in the admission sector. And joining us now is Dr. Fred Matiang'i to clarify on the issues that he talked about. Thank you very much for joining us here, sir. Now, this year, we've seen new regulations, of course, new guidelines on the Form 1 selection exercise, but there has been a lot of agitation from the Kenya Private Schools Association that these guidelines only favor public schools. You did meet officials from the Kenya Private Schools Association. What were some of their concerns and the solutions maybe that were put together?
Thank you, first of all, for having me. The Kenya Private Schools Association were concerned about proportional admission, saying it locks them out of locks the children from private schools out of admission to national schools. But we have sat down and looked at this process, and this year in admitting the Form 1 kids, we have admitted all the students who scored 400 marks and above, regardless of whether they were in private or in public schools, to national schools. Because we have a total of 23,000 places in the 103 national schools in the country. We had only 7,056 kids who scored 400 and above. So if you do the math, you will discover that we could accommodate all the 7,056 and still have about 16,000 places left. So we have tried, paying attention to the issue of proportional admission, we have tried to ensure that every child who scored 400 marks and above, whether they were in private or in public, have been admitted to a national school of their choice. About 97% of those got admitted in the schools they chose. And you know, each one of the candidates chose, had 4 choices to make. And so we try to fit them in the schools that they chose. So I hope that everyone will be satisfied that we worked hard to do that. There are several other things that we have done. You know, the guidelines that were given on proportional admission are not cast in stone, and they are not meant to they are not commandments. They are intended to guide us. And common sense, too, should guide us in the way we do these things. The children who go to private schools in Kenya are our children, too. They are Kenyan children. We would not like to disadvantage them, as it were. But at the same time, also, looking at the expansive nature of our country, we have to take care of all regions of our country and ensure that we have spread the places of national schools enough to take care of the interests that we have from across the country. So we've done well, I think.
And that means that this year, with these new regulations, we won't see cases like last year where we had students who had over 400 marks, but other students who had lower than 400 marks got slots in national schools. I mean, in secondary schools, while the ones who scored higher marks did not get slots.
I can tell you this, I can look you in the face, and I can look the country in the face and say this. No child who scored 400 marks and above will not be admitted in a national school, whether they were in a public or private school.
Okay, that's good news there for candidates and parents alike. But this year we've also seen 30,000 more students join the secondary schools as compared to last year. What, in your view, influenced this increase?
We've increased the Form 1 places across the country. The government has been pumping resources in school expansion for the last 1 year. And actually we do this year on year. Next year, because we anticipate there's going to be growth in the number of candidates who are sitting for exams, we are putting more resources to expand schools. You had the director of secondary school education, Mr. Masese, saying here that if we looked at expanding the streams in each of the schools that we have, we will have the places that will accommodate most of the students who do their KCPE exam. So it's a question of planning ahead and always anticipating this and figuring out that, of course, education is a right, and we have a responsibility as government to ensure that our children, those who sit for their KCPE exam and are ready to go to secondary school, have a place in the secondary school system. So the transition this year, for example, from primary to secondary school, is going to be 85.1. That's the highest in the history of this country. And we hope that it's going to be even higher as we go forward, because we are putting more resources to expand the secondary school places. And of course, ensuring that when we are doing the selection of Form 1, we listen to one another and we seek solutions together, both those in private schools and those in public schools. And we as government, we are there to provide solutions to these people. That's our responsibility.
Right. Now, I'm glad you mentioned the transition rate. Last year, it stood at about 78%. This year, it's gone up to 85%. When do we expect to see a 100% transition rate?
Well, let me tell you, my dear, it's very hard in any country on earth to achieve 100%, because factors that shape and influence transition range very widely. Some of them have got to do with the choices of the candidates themselves. There are candidates who will sit for the KCPE exam, but they will not want to go to secondary school. They want to go to the technical and vocational education. That's why if you look at the strategy of government, we are not only expanding secondary school places, we are also putting money in TVET, so that we increase places in the technical and vocational educational institutions. Because for this year, for example, we have over 137,000 who have chosen to go to technical and vocational educational institutions. We're ensuring that those ones are there. You remember the pledge the president and the deputy president made, that every county is going to have a technical or vocational education institution. And we have completed the construction of about 23 of them. And we want to move forward and ensure that whatever resources that we get, either from the Exchequer or development partners, goes into developing these institutions. So we can say in Kenya, practically we have achieved the 100% transition, but not necessarily to secondary school. Some have opted to go to technical and vocational education institutions.
Right. Now, speaking of the new reforms to tackle corruption in the admission process, will these new reforms also touch on parents who have been complaining of being charged hiked fees by school heads?
Well, you know, I need to also explain this very slowly so that you understand it. The fees guidelines were given for 2 years. They were meant to be for 2015 and 2016. It is expected that in 2016, we will relook at the fees guidelines again and review them. We could review them downwards in some cases, others would be reviewed upwards. We want to keep an open mind until the review process actually begins. Now, once we have reviewed the guidelines, they will be enforced for 2017 and 2018, as it were. What we are trying to do is working with the county directors of education, because quite frankly, where our game is now weak is at the supervision point, so that the county directors of education are our focal point in terms of supervising the schools, so that they ought to be getting, and we're now making a demand on them, that I want to see the fees guidelines by October. When schools close for the third term, all and sundry need to know what fees they are going to pay in January, and we can tell at that point who is exceeding the guidelines. If we don't do that, we wait to fumble around in January when they are paying fees. That's where sometimes we miss out. So it's a question of working to improve our systems. We are not at the highest possible point we want to be. This is work we have to do every day, and that's how progress is worked on. One day at a time, one step at a time.
Right.
We'll get there.
Absolutely. Now, you spoke about the new curriculum, which will be launched this year. When do we expect that to be launched? And just tell us a bit about that new curriculum.
The president has already directed that we commence work on the new curriculum. There is a roadmap that we agreed, which was approved by the president. The roadmap begins with a national stakeholders forum on the review of the curriculum. We have completed the curriculum review policy, which outlines what we want to do with the curriculum review. The work now, the actual work of the committee sitting together and working on the views on the curriculum is going to begin. Already I'm beginning to pull representative groups together so that they can begin to make contributions on how we will review our curriculum. So this is work that we're not going to do secretly. Everyone is going to be involved. and all formations within the sector are going to be involved in this as we go along. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That is Education Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i, just bringing us up to date with what he's been talking about in this new ceremony that is kicking off the Form 1 selection exercise. He has spoken of a new curriculum that will be launched by President Uhuru Kenyatta. He has also spoken about the selection process that is being used, saying that the dispute by the Kenya Private Schools Association, that the private schools will just have to comply with the fact that public schools do churn out a majority of candidates who will be joining secondary schools, and so it's only fair that the 70-30 ratio be complied with. Let me just hand you back over to Sophia Wanuna.
Thank you very much, Michelle Ngela, there for us from the Kenya Institute of Curriculum and Development, talking to Dr. Fred Matiang'i, who's the Cabinet Secretary Education, and he promised there that no student who scored more than 400 marks, whether in public or private school, will miss a slot in the national school.